from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
All right, America. Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. And the voice is working a little bit better. I'm recovering from bronchitis. We're back from Independence Day. Happy Monday, everybody. Happy to be with you guys on the air live again. I appreciate your patience over this very long Independence Day weekend. I hope everybody had a great time. I'm thrilled to be with you. And there is so much to talk about. Right? What an interesting Wednesday. And obviously the news has been piling up, but we've got cocaine in the White House. Of course, there's been no shortage of discussion on that today. But in addition to cocaine in the White House, you've got the federal court weighing in, saying that the Biden administration actually violated the First Amendment when they were, I'm going to use the word, colluding with big technology companies like social media companies, when they were saying, hey, look, Twitter, you need to do this, and Facebook, you need to do that. So fascinating, right? They called us all a bunch of conspiracy theorists, or at least they said that about people like me, who were saying, this is messed up and this is wrong. So it's just great to be vindicated. It's great to see that things are taking a turn for the better, for the truth. I was listening a little while ago to a clip of audio between one of the NBC News correspondents and Andrea Mitchell. Now, you know Andrea Mitchell. She's a young woman, a young reporter from NBC News. I'm kidding. She's probably, I don't know, been around since news has been around. She's been on NBC ever since I've seen NBC. Real veteran journalist. And she was saying that she'd never seen anything like this. And I'm thinking, I'd never seen anything like this either. Now, of course, there have been presidents in the past that have discussed in memoirs and whatnot how they've dealt with and experimented with and abused cocaine, like Obama in his memoir. There's been talk about people smoking pot at the White House. But I can't say I've ever seen somebody in a space for cell phones or whatnot actually go and leave a baggie of cocaine, which, temporarily shuts down the White House, causes the Secret Service to conduct an investigation, only to come back saying that it is, in fact, cocaine. I mean, this was a fascinating story, right? In so much that, it was, we found the substance. We don't know what it is. Now we do know what it is. Oh, my gosh, it's cocaine. Of course, then you got guys like me that are making the knee-jerk reaction going, oh, my gosh, what did Hunter use? The visitor's entrance? Good old Hunter's now coming in, leaving his party favors behind. And, of course, look, I don't mean to make light of his addiction. I'm just, taking cheap political shots here. Because I don't know if it has anything to do with Hunter. But why not, right? I mean, I guess that's part and parcel of what happens when you play in that end of the pool. You play in the deep end. That's kind of what happens. And I really don't mean to poke fun or take shots or make light of his addiction and whatnot, because I know a lot of people deal with that. But it just fascinates me that that's the case. And the first thing that goes through my head, of course, I put my political hat on, is that, well, who would have told the media about this, right? I mean, just imagine if somebody finds a baggie in your house, and maybe you don't have the same protocol that you have in the White House where they have to shut it down, see if it's anthrax, bring a hazmat team in and all that stuff. But let us presume that you don't have all of that. Then what do you have, right? I mean, I think most people would try to sweep this under the rug and make sure it goes away. Well, then why didn't that happen in this situation? right? And the only thing I can think of is, well, somebody wanted to make sure that the media found out about it. Who that somebody is, it's not Donald Trump. He's not in the White House. He's not able to leak that information. It's not some secret Trump supporter somewhere. You can't blame Republicans for this one. Not at all, right? Not even a little bit. Ultimately, what happens here is, in my opinion, as I surmise here, that somebody who doesn't like Joe El Baboso Biden made sure that the media found out about this so that the American public can say, wow, you know what? This is messed up. This is really 2 + 2 + 2 + 2 definitely isn't making 4. There's a lot more here, right? This is a crooked situation. And Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana, he's terrific. The guy is so funny. He's witty. It's always kind of unexpected because he's got this Southern charm to him. And then he comes out with a little zinger, which I think is funny. But I think he said it best when he said that the media is working overtime. I think the term he used was like an ugly stripper to make sure that this doesn't see the light of day. And I think they're going to make sure it sees the light of day, but they're going to make sure it doesn't see multiple news cycles. Even though it's a big deal, I'm pretty sure it's going to go away. Listen to this.
Look, I don't know if Mr. Hunter Biden committed a crime. I sure don't know if President Biden committed a crime. We're trying to get the facts. But I do know this, and I think the American people can see it. The Washington managerial elite, the establishment, if you will, is working harder than an ugly stripper to cover up whatever happened. And that's all that Congress is asking for is the facts.
So there you go. Congress is trying to find out what's going on. And he's not even talking about cocaine in the White House, by the way. He's simply talking about them trying to find out what's going on with all the other stuff that Hunter has now agreed to plead guilty to. And of course, Joe Biden maintains his son has done nothing wrong. Now, I've seen all sorts of videos out there that seem to show Hunter Biden rubbing his nose at an Independence Day celebration at the White House. I can't look. I rub my nose all the time. I have allergies. I'm allergic to almost everything under the sun, right? If it doesn't give me a sniffle, it gives me a dry cough. If it doesn't give me a dry cough, it gives me eczema and dry skin. Ultimately, what somebody rubbing their nose might be a telltale sign to them, but to me, it just means the guy had to rub his nose. Now, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about his legal situation. We're going to talk about the not the Supreme Court, but a federal court weighing in saying that, no, you can't collude. We're going to do a bunch of that conversation. Plus, we're going to talk about the role of faith in American history. We're going to do that a little bit. And we're also going to have some discussion on one patriot that is driving across the country. And you're going to want to hear why. So, of course, we're going to have Open Phone America because we're live and we're national tonight. So don't miss that. 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ is the phone number. Don't move a muscle. We're just getting started. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
If the cocaine episode has prompted the White House to ask the Secret Service to review its security protocol for visitors coming in.
So let them do their investigation. Again, this is under their purview. Let's see exactly what occurred and what happened. They're going to get to the bottom of this. They meaning the Secret Service, not going to get ahead of any changes in protocol or anything like that. Let's let the Secret Service do their job, which we believe and have all the confidence that they will get to the bottom of this.
All right, that's Karine Jean-Pierre at the White House press briefing today saying She's not going to go ahead and with any changes in protocol. We're going to let the Secret Service do their job and get to the bottom of it. And look, that's a reasonable response, although fascinating to me that there is zero response in terms of, wow, we're shocked, we can't believe it. I mean, this makes it seem like, look, every other time we found cocaine, we've relied on the Secret Service to get to the bottom of it. So just like that, we're going to do the same thing this time. I've never heard of such a thing. But I want to get to the bottom of this, as well as the rest of Hunter Biden's shenanigans and what's going on in this Biden White House with Nicolee Ambrose, former National Young Republicans chair and the Republican National Committeewoman, for Maryland. Welcome.
Great to be with you.
Thank you so much.
And we finally have an answer. And we finally have an answer to what is waking up Joe Biden for his press avail.
Right. It's fascinating to me that that this is the response we get with really just nothing added to it. And again, I probably shouldn't be surprised at that. Karine Jean-Pierre, this is kind of her job and the way she handles things all the time. But tell us your initial reaction to this, because I think this is just absolute crazy town. Am I wrong here?
So on the one hand, I look at the way KJP responds to most things, and I say, wow, okay, she actually did a respectable job in answering this question, right? It was dry. It was to the point. It's what most people would want in their press secretary, right? But yes, you're absolutely right. She's acting like this is just a normal occurrence, that they find cocaine all around the White House on a daily basis. And just another instance of, whoops, how, Hunter or Joe or whatever staff member is just leaving it laying around all the time. So it was, yes, alarmingly casual in the response.
Yeah, this is concerning to me because the response is it lacks I don't know really any real depth here, which again is kind of the usual with Karine Jean-Pierre. But the bigger issue is I think I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm just being a cynical talk radio host, but I feel like I've never heard of this happening before. I think most the American public is looking at this saying, wow, that's an interesting headline, cocaine in the White House. And like you said, we finally have an answer, right? It's been 2 days or 3 days of there was this mysterious substance and whatnot. So I think with all of the delay and the drama involved in trying to figure out what happened, it's just so interesting to me that we get this very laissez-faire kind of response that I guess we get that with everything else. But do you think that this becomes a story that we'll talk about for days to come until we get to the bottom of it, or does this go away soon?
See, it's two-sided, right? Because on the one hand, people are used to these Biden family disasters, right? To the point that it's embarrassing for our country. It's embarrassing that the leader of our country is expected to perform at such a low level along with his family members, that probably no one's really surprised by this cavalier attitude toward, hardcore illegal drugs in the people's house, or what should be the people's house. And, on the other hand, you have to say, good job, the Secret Service. They're following their guidance. They're doing what they're supposed to do, which is, whenever there's a problem, they're supposed to handle it very professionally and report on it. And thank goodness for them being so professional, because otherwise we would never hear about these things.
Yeah. And I think this is just one more of a string of interesting things regarding the Biden family and in this White House.
It's endless.
It really is. Now, I want to get your thoughts on the bigger issue, which I think is being overshadowed now by the discovery of cocaine inside of the White House, which is Hunter Biden's plea deal, right? He says, okay, yes, I did it. Famously, his dad said, my son did nothing wrong. He's the smartest guy I know. Now, he's still the smartest guy he knows, and he still loves him, and I expect him to love his son. That's a great thing. But now it's, he won't say his son did nothing wrong because he's admitted to doing something wrong, and he's getting this, what many are saying is a sweetheart deal. I think it's a better deal than I would have gotten. and I hope to never be in that situation. But what's your thought on that?
Right. Okay. So this story is going to come back heavy. It was here last week, right? When all of a sudden, all the mainstream press that wouldn't touch a Hunter Biden story or a Biden family corruption story with a 10-foot pole suddenly started reporting on it, right? We had CBS, we had the New York Times do this whole article where basically everyone's like, oh, yeah, Hunter Biden's been doing all these totally illegal things. But there's a whole lot under the surface of this, right? Because on the one hand, you have the media, the quote unquote mainstream media, finally admitting there are these problems, right? That is a totally separate conversation in the Biden family corruption from the real story of the whistleblower, which was how our big brother government was utilized from multiple agencies to sidetrack, sideline, and torpedo investigations into Hunter Biden. So we've got two totally different corruption stories here, one with the Biden family and one with our government not doing their job as a political favor to someone, which gets to the point of we have a two-tier justice system, right? We've got elites like Hillary Clinton, like Hunter Biden, like Joe Biden himself. Like, goodness sakes, Charlie Rangel back in the day. If you are an elite Democrat in Washington, D.C., you can get away with just about anything. But if you're anyone else in America, whether you be just an everyday person, a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, or an elected Republican, I dare say, you have a different system of justice. You are going to get in a whole lot of trouble if you commit crimes, or maybe sometimes even if you don't. Okay, so two-tier justice system, absolutely
you bring
right.
up such a good point when you bring up Charlie Rangel, and it reminds me, for whatever reason, of another former congressman who had an arrest inside of his house for running a brothel in his house. And again, he wasn't running the brothel, but someone was arrested for running a brothel out of his house, Barney Frank. And that was a big nothing burger when it happened. I think most people, you could say, was there a brothel inside of a congressman's house? And people go, no, come on, it's fake news. You guys are all conspiracy theorists. And it just amazes me how things are just a flash in the pan. Another thing that bothers me is when people misspell my last name. And of course, it's Valdez with an S, but your first name has two E's at the end. And I'm pretty sure I mispronounced it on the way in. What is the correct pronunciation of your first name?
It is Nicolee. Just think Nicole with two E's, Lee at the end, Nicolee.
That is so cool. Nicolee with an extra E. I love it. All right, folks, we are on with Nicolee, and we're coming back to continue our discussion on what happened with a federal court when they said, you know what, you're not allowed to collude with big tech. And this is a tremendous blow to the White House. This is already an embattled White House that has bad numbers, 34% approval rating on how they're dealing with the economy. It's not looking good for Joe Biden. Anyway, stick around. We're coming right back. Don't go anywhere. Nicolee Ambrose, Rich Valdez, it's America at Night. We're coming right back.
Listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
A federal judge barred parts of the administration from contacting social media platforms about online content. Now, the ruling came in response to a lawsuit brought by Republican-led states alleging that the White House went too far in its efforts to curb content that challenged vaccines or threatened elections. The judge said certain departments should not reach out to companies like Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram for, quote, the purpose of urging, encouraging, pressuring, or inducing any manner the removal, the deletion, the suppression, or the reduction of content containing protected free speech. The ruling singles out several government agencies, including the Department of Justice, of State, the CDC, as well as HHS.
All right, that's a report for NBC News on what happened when a federal judge said, yes, you've overstepped your bounds. You've violated the First Amendment. The Biden administration guilty as charged. We're talking about that with Nicolee Ambrose. She's a former National Young Republicans chair and the Republican National Committeewoman for Maryland. Nicolee, when you hear this, I got to tell you, I was happy. I was like, wow, look at this. I can't believe the media getting it right for once. It was almost a breath of fresh air, and it's probably that like Stockholm syndrome, right? At this point, I'm used to getting abused by the left within the media, but I was happy that they got it right for once. What say you?
Absolutely. I mean, it's really scary when it seems to only be successful or done by the left. When the left can lean on any company in America and say, if you don't change your narrative to what we want, we will come after you with the force of the government. That's terrifying. And that is expressly not what America is supposed to be about.
And you know, we've seen it time and time again, in particular with this administration, but with a history going back for decades with multiple Democrat administrations weaponizing government, and for the first time ever having a weaponization of government committee, which I think is great. But in this particular situation, we've got the State Department canceling their meeting with Facebook after the judge said that, look, this ruling on censorship went too far. And I think this is fantastic. This is a victory for the American people. I find the timing just so interesting that this hasn't ended, right? There's actually a court case here,
right?
And it didn't stop anybody. They're like, no, we're good. You know, the amount of downplaying that I've seen in this administration, I have to say, I've never seen as much of it anywhere else. And nothing is a big deal to Joe Biden or Karine Jean-Pierre. Everything is kind of business as usual. No, come on, nothing to see here. It just amazes me how, we're actually having the judiciary weigh in to say, excuse me, White House, you cannot collude with social media companies, and yet they still had meetings on the books. It just blows me away.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And we're not just we're talking about COVID-19, sure, but we're also literally talking about things like the Hunter Biden laptop, these things that he's, being prosecuted and under investigation for. We're talking about just general censorship. Now, I'm going to this was on the cover of the Wall Street Journal's weekend paper, and I'm going to just directly quote this. It says, so this is a case, it was called Missouri versus Biden, and the states involved were basically Louisiana and Missouri, and it was a judge out of Louisiana that issued this decree on Independence Day. So, I mean, props to the judge. Great timing, reminding us of that whole freedom thing and freedom of speech. But it literally says, quote from this article, the plaintiffs in the case, Missouri versus Biden, have argued that the White House and other government officials bullied social media companies into suppressing views disliked by the administration, including criticism of mask mandates and objections to COVID-19 vaccination for children, with veiled threats of new regulatory liabilities and antitrust enforcement. This is insane that this is allowed in America. I mean, thank God for this judge even taking this case. A lot of other courts throughout the nation kept rejecting people's cases that even just trying to be heard on this subject matter. And any of us who either have been personally or have a friend on Facebook or whatever social media platform that's been blocked, and they don't even know what they've been blocked for half the time at this point, right? It's something related to COVID or a vaccine or Lord knows what at this point. But how on earth we can be sitting here in a supposedly free country founded on the concept that government is beholden to us, not us to the government, and be dealing with an elected official who's supposed to represent us, thinking that they can basically play mind games and block information from coming to us is absurd. And it is high time we press this issue. And thank goodness for this judge who is doing that for us.
You're right. And I just want to quote the judge, right? That's Judge Doughty. And another quote from this opinion here, from the ruling, says, quote, during the COVID-19 pandemic, a period perhaps best characterized by widespread doubt and uncertainty, the United States government seems to have assumed a role similar to an Orwellian ministry of truth. That's a direct quote from the judge. And thank God for somebody who's actually thinking and who's read 1984 to understand how this works.
Exactly.
Everybody else, I think, appreciates that. I don't want a ministry of truth, right?
Yes, maybe in Harry Potter, but no, not in America. Thank you very much. We have a different value system.
100%.
Or at least we're supposed to.
At least we thought we had a different system, right?
Exactly.
It's lamentable what's going on. Folks, we're on with Nicolee Ambrose, a former national chair of the Young Republicans and the GOP's National Committeewoman for Maryland. And we're going to be getting to your calls and continuing our conversation on what's going on in this White House. I want to talk about some of Biden's numbers and the rest of the crazy coming out of D.C. straight ahead. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
How many times have you ever spoken to your son about his overseas business dealings?
I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings.
And as far as the president's involvement in that?
So that's kind of the crux of one of the issues here is that we weren't allowed to ask questions about Dad. We weren't allowed to ask about the big guy. We weren't allowed to include certain names and document requests and search warrants. So, we were precluded from following that line of questioning.
And that is the whistleblower from the IRS that was conducting the investigation into Hunter Biden, Gary Shapley, who works for the IRS. And he's been beaten up legally, right? They're using all sorts of lawfare and tactics to beat him up. Today, he comes out swinging, saying that he wants the Washington Post. He demands that they clear his good name after Hunter Biden's legal team made what he's calling defamatory claims against him. Now, lawyers representing IRS whistleblower Gary Shapley, or Shapley, I'm not sure the pronunciation on that one, sent a letter demanding that the Washington Post set the record straight on the allegedly false and defamatory statements made by Hunter Biden's legal team. And this is an ongoing thing because he's the sole whistleblower, and he's done a great job. He's been on 60 Minutes. He's been on Fox News. We've seen him in multiple outlets. He's a credible whistleblower. I think his story makes a lot of sense, and you heard him right now saying it. We weren't allowed to pursue any questions related to the big guy, anything about Hunter Biden's father. This was all prohibited, according to the whistleblower, saying the DOJ put the kibosh on that. So I want to get to the bottom of that, and to do that, we're with Nicolee Ambrose, former National Young Republicans chair and the Republican National Committeewoman for Maryland. Nicolee, what are your thoughts on this matter with Gary Shapley, or Shapley?
All right. As I hear it, it's Shapley, and so you're exactly right, Gary Shapley. So he was a senior IRS investigatory supervisor. So he is high up in the food chain, right? Mm-hmm. And he actually, he has a subordinate. He's done this a lot. And let me tell you, the IRS does not go after, at that time, the former vice president's son unless they have a rock solid case, right? Mm-hmm. And essentially, so it's Shapley, plus it is one of his subordinates who's also agreed to be a whistleblower, but he is known in the press as Mr. X. And drumroll, apparently there is going to be a third whistleblower coming out from a different federal agency very shortly. So we will be at 3 Biden whistleblowers that Hunter Biden's team are going to have to go after, malign, and try to destroy in the press, because we know that's what they will do. But here are some of the details from Shapley's report. He was supposed to be working for on the team with U.S. Attorney for Delaware, David Weiss. Weiss had a good reputation, okay? But the problem was he was only for Delaware. So he went to Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the United States of America, and said, I need a higher level. I need to be made special counsel so I can override, basically, Biden-appointed U.S. attorneys in these different jurisdictions that would not allow him to proceed with pressing charges where their investigation led them. They needed to press charges in the state of California and in the District of Columbia. Merrick Garland turned down that request. On October 7th of 2022, the U.S. Attorney, David Weiss, stated to his team, to 6 high-level federal agents, that he did not have the authority and to do what they needed to do in this investigation. So that meant Merrick Garland was denying it. Merrick Garland has paraded himself in front of the U.S. Senate, in front of Chuck Grassley, in front of numerous elected officials, saying, they have the authority to do whatever they wanted to do in this investigation. Absolutely not true. So this summer is going to get hot and heavy, because here's what's next. Coming up in Congress, there will be hearings to determine who is lying. Then Chuck Grassley in the U.S. Senate is not going to be happy, because Chuck Grassley has been at this game a lot longer than any of these pikers, and he's not going to take kindly to being lied to under oath. And then Kevin McCarthy, the speaker, has already potentially said, if any of this stuff appears to be true, we will proceed with impeachment articles for Merrick Garland. Then next, coming up even soon, pretty soon, we've got the Judiciary Committee in the House. Garland is scheduled to testify on September 20th, but that's probably going to be moved up based on this new intelligence. And then we have the FBI director, whose agents were also involved in this, testifying on July 12th. And that committee hearing is going to be led by Ohio's very own Jim Jordan. And then the other big news for July is going to be that good old Hunter Biden is slated to appear in federal court in Delaware on July 26th to formalize the plea deal. Numerous legal minds, including folks like Alan Dershowitz and the former head of the Department of Justice's Tax Division, say this plea deal should be thrown out and the judge should not accept it because it was based on a lie. And here is, to me, the scariest thing. Throughout the investigation, this is what Shapley basically testified to and has been sharing very directly in these interviews, federal prosecutors blocked search warrants, interviews, and more serious criminal charges. Examples of this are the FBI alerted the Secret Service to keep Hunter from being interviewed. That is terrifying abuse of government power there. Two, there were a lot of, the IRS believed the location of a lot of these documents was in a Virginia storage locker. The government tipped off Hunter's lawyers to play games with the documents hidden in the Virginia storage locker. And then when the IRS was going to kind of do a sting operation and interview 12 key people in one day, they only got one interview, and it appeared that just as in these other instances, the government had tipped off these 12 people so as to be hidden and not available for the IRS's investigation. So this is a big cover-up. So when I said on the one hand we have the Biden family criminal activity, that's true. But what's almost even scarier to me is different federal agencies seemingly very directed, very specific work to interfere with a legal case, a criminal case.
Wow. Well, Nicolee, it sounds like you've got your finger on the pulse of everything that's going on. I hope to bring you back on soon to get another update, especially in July, because it seems like everything's going down in July. Folks, we're on with former National Young Republicans Chair and the Republican National Committeewoman for Maryland, Nicolee Ambrose. Nicolee, let everybody know how they can keep up to speed with you and all the work you're doing.
Oh, you're awesome. And it's been great chatting with you. I'm at NicoleeAmbrose.com, NICOLEE Ambrose.com. And Facebook, I'm at Nicolee USA, NICOLEE USA. And Twitter at Nicolee Ambrose.
Outstanding. Folks, give her a follow. And again, I thank you for bringing us up to speed on what's going on. It's absolutely crazy what's coming out of this White House. It's hard to juggle all these multiple stories because there's so many, in my opinion, scandals coming out of the White House. I appreciate your time. Hope to see you again soon.
Great chatting. Have a great night.
You too. All right, folks, and your calls are coming up. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
I'm Joe Biden. I am Joe Biden's husband. You know, I've often say, and you're tired of hearing me say it probably, but children are the kite strings. They're not somebody else's children. They're all our children. Are the kite strings that lift our national ambitions aloft. And you hold those strings. You hold those strings. And our job is to make sure you have what you need to do what you do best.
To do what you do best. And listen, one of the things that Joe Biden does really well is sniff the hair of little kids. Now, listen, I've never been able to explain that. I've never met a reporter, a White House correspondent, anybody who could explain why on earth Joe Biden decides to sniff the hair of small children. But be that as it may, statements like this one are concerning, not because of the collectivist nature, it takes a village, these are all our kids. I get it. You know, if you live in a tight-knit neighborhood and you see, Mr. So-and-so's kid, riding his bike down your block and somebody is picking on him or somebody tries to lure him into a van with candy and, Joe Biden bumper stickers, obviously you're going to say, hey, cut it out. And you're going to, stick up for the kid because, yeah, they're all our kids in that sense. We all have to look out for one another. But when it comes to Biden's comments here, I feel like, this is the audience, right? He's talking to the NEA, the National Education Association, at their annual meeting. This, to me, is where it's concerning because they also feel like it's not just, your kid. They feel like it's their kid, right? They are in charge here. They are the mind shapers, or what they call themselves, mind benders, or mind shapers, whichever one it is. Not just educators. They're not here just to, bring your kids up to snuff on reading, writing, and arithmetic and critical thinking skills, but they want to change the way your kid operates, right? The entire operating system is going to be changed. They introduced the social, emotional learning, the critical race theory, critical gender theory. I mean, it's just fascinating to think that all of that is the job of a school teacher, right? To turn your kid into a commie? No, thank you. Anyway, we're going to get a little bit more on that a little bit later. But straight ahead, we're going to talk about the role that faith plays in American history. You do not want to miss this. Our phone number, 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Your liberty-loving Latino amigo, happy to be with you. It's Wednesday edition. I think earlier I said it was the Monday edition because it feels like a Monday, but it's actually Wednesday, and we're coming back off of the Independence Day weekend. It was a 4-day weekend for many people. Wow. I feel very independent after 4 days off, let me tell you. And thrilled to be here with you. Our telephone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. If you want to join our late-night national town hall conversation, I encourage you to do so. And on the heels of the death blow that was dealt to Biden's student debt bailout, we have another court decision today from a lower federal court saying that the Biden administration overstepped its bounds, and that's putting it nicely, with respect to its handling of the coronavirus pandemic by colluding with social media companies. Here's a quote that I read earlier. I just want to repeat it because I think it bears repeating. During the COVID-19 pandemic, a period perhaps best characterized by widespread doubt and uncertainty, the United States government seems to have assumed a role similar to an Orwellian ministry of truth, end quote. That is federal Judge Doughty, the presiding judge on that case brought by Louisiana and Missouri, and with the court saying, yes, there was a violation of the First Amendment. And that's not the only thing that happened in the White House. Of course, a white substance was found after a hazmat team had to go and find it. And it turns out it's cocaine that they found inside the White House. Man, I tell you, it's giving new meaning to the term White House, right? Unbelievable what's going on. And let me tell you, ever since the Republic, I'm talking about Plato's writing, the Republic, there has been a study of statecraft, and it's been a staple of Western discourse. And, of course, the same goes for the study of various leaders. But Jewish scholars and thinkers, you haven't seen as much, right? Strikingly few have turned their attention to the history of Jewish leaders. Well, there's a new book out. It's called Providence and Power, 10 Portraits in Jewish Statesmanship. The author is the director of Yeshiva University's Strauss Center for the Torah and Western Thought, and he's the rabbi at Congregation Sharith Israel in New York, the oldest Jewish congregation in the United States. Rabbi Meir Soloveichik, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me on, Rich.
It's my pleasure. And I'm interested in the book. I'm interested in the entire conversation, really, because I think overall faith plays such a role in our American history and our founding. I know that you kind of you string in different elements of how the Bible is portrayed in our American history, in addition to citing various exactly what's in the title, right? These portraits in Jewish statesmanship, which I think are fascinating, because whether it's Jewish statesmanship or anybody else's statesmanship, I think you can always draw something from a solid statesman, you know? I mean, that's just the way it is. This is why we constantly, I think, draw from the wisdom of Winston Churchill and Ronald Reagan and so many others in modern history. So let's get into the book, because obviously there was a need for the book, and it's obviously in its own lane. But let's discuss how you approached this faith in American history.
Thank you. So you're absolutely right that there's a great deal to be learned from every sort of statesman that achieved greatness. Churchill was one of my heroes, was the greatest statesman of the 20th century, and yet biblical statesmanship is different. And a case that I would make is that actually the greatest of American statesmen have uniquely paralleled and imitated the biblical idea of statesmanship in a way that other great statesmen might not have. So, for example, the example I give in the book, Churchill was a great statesman, but the one virtue that you would never apply to Churchill really was humility. As my friend Andrew Roberts, the great historian who wrote an amazing biography of Churchill, I think the way he put it Andrew said, Churchill believed in God, but in Churchill's theology, God's job was largely taking care of Winston Churchill, and he knew he was a great man, and that confidence in himself fueled his greatness. But when you look at somebody like King David, David, of course, knows of his great political and military gifts, but he feels at the same time that he is a vessel in God's plan. He's able somehow to simultaneously balance incredibly independent, brilliant action militarily and politically, while combining that with a sense of providence. And when you look at American leadership at its best, Washington and Lincoln, you see that as well in a way that you don't necessarily see with the greatest of European statesmen.
Outstanding. Well, I want to continue to pull on that thread because I know we won't have time for all 10 portraits, but I'm always interested in a look at that because, again, I used Churchill as a modern day example, but I think your King David example is an excellent one where we often rely on the wisdom of David, or even in just popular culture. People find themselves outside of statesmanship, just in discourse, constantly saying things like, we're going to split the baby on this one, right? Referring to King Solomon and his wisdom. Right. So I think, there's so much that we can draw from these statesmen that are in the Bible. And let's I'll give you a free rein to take that thread and run with it.
So one of the most famous examples, of course, and one that I discuss in the book is Queen Esther. Here you have someone who suddenly finds herself in a position of great power and influence, and is told by her cousin Mordecai when the two of them are addressing this genocidal threat against the Jewish people. He says to his cousin, the queen, in one of the most famous verses in the Bible, who knows, but perhaps for this moment, you rose to royalty. So a certain sense that is with which great political actors in the biblical model are endowed is a sense of providential destiny and an understanding that this may be the moment that God has set for one to take action. Strikingly, actually, when Abraham Lincoln was visited right before the Battle of Antietam, and they were lobbying for an Emancipation Proclamation, they actually quoted, this group of American ministers from my hometown of Chicago and from Illinois, visited Lincoln from Lincoln's home state, and they quoted him in this petition. They gave him a petition asking him to issue an Emancipation Proclamation, and they quoted this verse as well that Mordecai says to Esther, who knows, but perhaps for this moment, you rose to the leadership. And so that's one of the most famous examples of biblical leadership. Now, the greatness of Esther's story, of course, is that she takes this inspiration, but she devises her own plan. For your listeners that are familiar with the book of Esther, Esther suddenly finds herself the wife of this paranoid, tyrannical king. A decree of genocide is placed against the Jewish people. Now, against Achashverosh or Xerxes, and she's inspired by her cousin, by Mordecai, to seize the moment. But actually, if you read the book, if you read the Bible, she devises her own plan. Her cousin, Mordecai, says, here's what you should do. And she says, no, I don't want to do that. That's a terrible plan. I'm going to play on the paranoia of the king. I'm going to, because it's kind of like being married to Stalin, right? You have to figure out what you're going to do here and what's the best way to turn him against his vizier, to play on his paranoias. And I argue in the book that Esther is actually one of the most brilliant political actors in the Bible and in the history of the world, because she balances this political brilliance side by side with the sense of providential destiny. So that's what I think the biblical ideal of leadership is. And then I go on to argue in the book that this is reflected, of course, this balance of political brilliance and providential destiny is also reflected in the modern story of the state of Israel, which is, of course, a story both of political brilliance but also of modern miracle.
Folks, We're talking about the brand new book, Providence and Power, 10 Portraits in Jewish Statesmanship, with the author, Rabbi Meir Soloveichik. He's director of Yeshiva University's Strauss Center for Torah and Western Thought, and he's the rabbi at Congregation Sharif Israel in New York, which consequently is the oldest Jewish congregation in the United States. We're going to continue this discussion of statesmanship, both as it applies historically and as it applies, as he just alluded to, a little bit more in modern times in the state of Israel, straight ahead. Plus your calls, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Rich Valdez, our phone number, 833-482-5337. And our guest is Rabbi Meir Soloveichik. He's director of Yeshiva University's Strauss Center for Torah and Western Thought. And he's also the rabbi at Congregation Sharif Israel in New York, which is the oldest Jewish congregation in the United States. His book, Providence and Power, 10 Portraits in Jewish Statesmanship. And we left off with a look at how modern-day Israel, the state of Israel, is depicting its statesmanship. I know over the years, from my observations, I've seen a tremendous statesman in Benjamin Netanyahu. And I feel like there's a lot of intricacies and nuance to the political structure in Israel. But Rabbi, let's talk about your lessons on Providence and Power.
So in our focus of modern Israel, of course, I'll mention that in the book, I talk about a medieval Jewish leader, Isaac Abarbanel, who was a leader in Jewish Spain at the time when the Jews of Spain were expelled. The reason why it's important to mention this for your listeners is that, as I note in the book, the great scholar who wrote a biography of this story of the expulsion of the Jews from Spain was Ben Zion Netanyahu. That is Bibi Netanyahu's father. And so it's important to understand that, because Prime Minister Netanyahu, who talks about his father and the influence that he had on him, has a deep sense of the fragility of Jewish history and the importance of statesmanship in history, especially when you think of the great dangers that Jews have faced in the past, but also the incredible endurance that Jews have made manifest throughout history. Now, Rich, when we talk about modern Israel, what you have is, on the one hand, a series of incredible acts of statesmanship, but also a series of stories so unlikely that ultimately only Providence can explain them. You have a totally assimilated Jew, Theodor Herzl, in Vienna in the 1890s, who suddenly writes a pamphlet and says, you know what? The Jewish people can recreate a Jewish state, and Jews can come from all over the world and build this state. And he sat in his hotel room when he brought together the first Zionist Congress in Basel, and he wrote, sitting there in the late 1890s, he says, I have created the Jewish state. Maybe people will see it in 5 years, perhaps in 50 years, but everyone will see it. And essentially, almost exactly 50 years after you wrote that, the Jewish state came into being. So how are we to explain this? How are we to explain stories like this? Is it a case of brilliant statesmanship? Of course it is. How are we to explain Israel being born in 1948 and defeating masses of armies arrayed against it? Is it a story of military brilliance? Of course, yes, it is. How are we to explain the Six-Day War, where Israel suddenly reunites Jerusalem and fulfillment of biblical prophecy? Is it acts of great statesmanship? Yes, it is. But is it only that? No, because if you study history, you realize that history alone cannot fully explain it. The late, great Catholic historian, Paul Johnson, just recently passed away, one of the great historians. He said that in the 20th century, over 100 states came into being, but only Israel's birth qualifies as a miracle. And so the story of Israel is simultaneously it's simultaneously a story of brilliant statesmanship, and I document the statesmen that helped bring Israel into being. I talk about Theodore Herzl. I talk about an American Zionist leader who was on the American Supreme Court, Justice Brandeis. I talk about Israeli leaders like Menachem Begin. But it's also a story, Rich, of someone, I argue, beyond great statesmanship itself. And Jewish statesmanship at its best had a deep understanding that it was reflecting something much larger than just statesmanship. That's the argument I make in the book.
Yeah. Are you alluding to Almighty God? Is that the argument?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at prophetic predictions, what's described is Jerusalem expanding beyond its walls, the streets being so crowded that it's difficult to get into the city, the desert blooming. I've seen all these things. You know, I say this, unfortunately, I say it as a rabbi, unfortunately. Sometimes I'll get off the plane in Tel Aviv, get into a cab, and I'll be sitting in traffic getting into Jerusalem, and I'll sigh in annoyance, like, oh, now I have to sit here in traffic, until I realize that, wait a minute, this area was totally empty. There was no city here.
Right. You're sitting in a miracle.
And this I'm sitting in a miracle. What am I annoyed about? And that faith, lasts for around 5 minutes. We're human beings until you get annoyed again
until you look at your watch again.
Yes, exactly, because we're human beings. But you have to remind yourself, if you had told anyone living 100 years beforehand. Let me give you one other example, Rich, if I can. I mentioned this in a piece once in the Wall Street Journal. When Theodore Herzl,
we got about 30 seconds.
I'll leave you with this. When Theodore Herzl wrote his pamphlets in the late 1890s about the Jewish state, he said he spoke about he said he didn't think that the Hebrew language as a modern spoken language could be resurrected. And he wrote, can one imagine buying a train ticket in Hebrew? Such a thing cannot be done. I was recently in Israel. I bought a train ticket and it said on it in Hebrew, Rakevet Yisrael, train of Israel. So in other words, the miracle surpassed even the dreams of the dreamers that helped bring the Jewish state into being. That's a combination of statesmanship and miracle for you.
Look at that. And it's a very fitting title, right? Providence and Power, 10 Portraits in Jewish Statesmanship, Rabbi Meir Soloveichik. I want to thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Because it was a fascinating conversation, one that we could probably have had for another hour and a half, honestly. There's a lot to discuss.
Thank you.
I'm a fan of history, in particular history that includes the Bible. Thanks again for your time. I appreciate it, and Godspeed to you. Folks, get a copy of the book wherever you get your books, Providence and Power. When we come back, more discussion straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. I am Rich Valdez.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So listen to this. A new report says that 77% of youth are ineligible for military service. They can't serve. Unfit to serve. This is crazy. There's a piece in Fox News, a piece on military.com as well. Unbelievable. This is according to a new study that from the Pentagon that shows 77% of young Americans would not qualify for military service without a waiver due to being overweight, using drugs, or having mental and physical health problems. Now, this comes on the heels of a story on the weekend where the U.S. Army had one of their majors, who is a trans individual, on the cover of the webpage on the masthead, and promoting that and promoting diversity. And it just it goes back to this debate of, whether people that are mentally ill are able to serve, and is this in fact, what they call gender dysmorphia? Is this still considered mental illness? I think it is, according to the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, the DSM-4 or DSM-5. So just really interesting to see what's going on with the challenges that our military is facing with recruitment. And we'll get into a little bit more of that and how they can retain some of these soldiers a little bit later. But I want to talk about one particular service member right now, and that's Scott Montefusco, former Marine and former FBI agent. And he is not only retired from the service and the FBI, but he's a New Yorker like me, and he served for a really long time, and he's about to go on or embark on a 65-day drive across the United States in a 1952 Korean War Willis Jeep. And he's doing this to support the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. I want to hear all about it. Captain Scott Montefusco, welcome, sir.
Oh, thank you so much, Rich. I appreciate your time and your invite to be on your show tonight.
You bet. Happy to have you. Happy to have this discussion. I salute your patriotism. Thank you for your service. And I find it fascinating that you're doing something I've always wanted to do, not necessarily in a Willis Jeep from 1952, but I've always wanted to drive cross country, probably in an RV, and stop at like all of the cool national parks. But tell us about what inspired this journey that you're currently on.
Well, what inspired American history,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm an automotive guy, and I was a motor transport officer in the Marine Corps, and I knew a lot about automotive history. And many years ago, I learned of the very first person to ever cross the United States in an automobile. So I knew the story. And in 2003, a documentary film came out on the person, and his person's name is Horatio Nelson Jackson. And a documentary came out, and it was produced by Ken Burns, he's the premier documentarist that has done many documentaries. The Civil War, World War II, Vietnam.
He is the namesake of the famous Ken Burns effect.
Yes, you got that right, and I use it a lot in my videos.
Yeah.
So he came out with a documentary, and I knew the story already. I was counting the days until that documentary would come out. It was called Horatio's Drive, and it was about the first transcontinental journey across America. And my wife and I sat down to watch it. We watched it, and at the conclusion of that documentary, I turned to her and I said, "Hon, you know what this means?" And she rolled her eyes and said, "Oh, God, what?" And I said, "We're going to do this trip in a Willys Jeep." Because I've always been a vintage car guy and a Willys Jeep guy. And so that's what inspired the trip, but it's my love of history and my wanting to share history with anybody and everybody willing to hear about history, particularly young people. I want to get young people involved in learning our history, American history. There's so many topics to American history, and this is just one. And this is why one of the reasons to do this trip. The other reasons, of course, I'm retired now. I was a mandatory retirement age from the FBI at age 57. I had 36 years of service between the Marine Corps and the FBI. So 36 years in and out of uniform. But I'm not done serving my country and our country. And I want to inspire young people to maybe serve in law enforcement, first responder, fire police, or possibly our military. And so I thought, well, let me do something that will inspire history, inspire young people to love our country and to take an interest. And I thought this story about the first transcontinental journey would do just that. So I started planning for it. I said, well, let me restore a 1952 Jeep open air car, much like the very first car that made that trip. The very first car that made that trip was a 2-cylinder, 20 horsepower Winton auto car.
Wow.
And it didn't have a windshield. It didn't have a top. And I thought, well, perfect. The Jeep doesn't have to use the windshield, so I refused to use the windshield. I refused to use the top. I want to do it just like he did it, and I want to do it in the dates that he did it. He made the trip between May 23rd and July 26th. So I'm retracing his route across the United States of America on the same dates that he did it, but he did it 120 years ago in 1903.
Amazing.
So,
again, I just want to remind the audience, we're talking about Colonel Horatio Nelson Jackson, who made this same trip 120 years ago on the same dates back in 1903. Folks, we're going to come right back and continue our discussion on this trip across the country and, of course, Scott Montefusco's desire to serve. And maybe he could convince a few people to serve as well, and his love for history. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We're having a conversation about Colonel Horatio Nelson Jackson and his trek across the United States by automobile, an open-air automobile with no windshield, and the reenactment of that, a real-life reenactment of that, that's being done in a 1952 Korean War Jeep. But this time, it's happening now in 2023, not back in the day in 1903, 120 years ago. Of course, our guest is retired Captain Scott Montefusco, former Marine and ex-FBI agent. Scott Montefusco, let's continue where we left off. You were telling us about what impacted you on Colonel Jackson's trip.
Yes. So after 36 years of service in and out of uniform, you know, all the places I've been and could have been, I came through my years of service well. I have no serious injuries. I'm in good health, but I did serve with others who didn't ring the bell, who sadly died in the line of duty or suffered wounds that they carry with them today. And I'm not just going to go away into the sunset because I rang the bell and I'm retired. I want to continue to give back to our country. And this is one of the ways I'm doing it, by making this drive. So I'm inspired by Horatio Nelson Jackson, even though he did this 120 years ago. In a lot of ways, he was like me. He was a patriot, an adventurer, somebody who set his mind to a goal. Nothing could stop him. The Marine Corps mentality is accomplish the mission. And this is what he did. He made this trek, and you have to put history in perspective. In 1903, there were no roads outside the city. None. And there were no gas stations. You bought gas at hardware stores. And when he does this drive, he is from Burlington, Vermont. So he doesn't know a lot.
How did he handle the gas
country.
situation? That's a really interesting point.
Yeah,
so
he brought some extra cans with him. And luckily they didn't fall off the car, because as he makes the trip, all sorts of gear falls off the car and he loses it. I mean, the car's a 2-cylinder, 20 horsepower, and he loads it down with 1,200 pounds of camping gear. Can you imagine?
Wow.
And he begins this journey, with only 1 hour's driving experience. He didn't own a car. He didn't know anything about cars. He took a 1-hour driving lesson in San Francisco, as a means to fill his time while waiting for a train that's going to take him back to the East Coast where he's from, Vermont. And he takes on this trip. It's incredible. He hires a bicycle mechanic because he doesn't know anything about the mechanics of cars. He hires a bicycle mechanic to ride shotgun with him. And he takes off 3 days after he decides he's going to make this journey. So very little planning.
And with a guy who knows how to fix bikes, not Jeeps.
Right.
Or automobiles at the time, 2-cylinder ones, right?
Went in on a car. And when he decides he's going to do this trip, he doesn't even own a car. And the whole trip actually starts with a bet. You see, he and his wife are from Vermont, and they're on their way home from from Alaska. They had visited Alaska. Here again, put history in perspective. You live in Vermont, and you decide you're going to go to Alaska to check out an investment to maybe buy some. Actually, they were looking at buying into a gold mine. So they take a train from Vermont to New York to San Francisco, get on a ship, go to Alaska, figure out, we don't want to buy this gold mine. So now they're on their way home, and they get stuck in San Francisco for 2 days waiting for the train back to New York. And he finds himself out in a club, and the locals are arguing about whether the horse is going to be replaced by the car or not. And he weighs into the argument, and he says, I'll bet you I can drive a car from San Francisco to New York City in less than 90 days, and I'll bet you $50 I can do it. And that's what starts all that. He doesn't own a car. He doesn't know how to drive except for a 1-hour driving lesson he took for fun to fill the time while he's waiting for the train back to the East Coast. And 3 days later, he buys a used 1903 Winton car, puts 1,200 pounds of gear on it, hires a bicycle mechanic, and begins his journey.
I tell you, you tell me a story like that with all of those facts, and my response would probably be, what do you do, lose a bet? That would be my thinking of why you would take such a trek. Folks, we're on with Scott Montefusco, former Marine and ex-FBI agent, who's taking a similar trek on the road to Alaska, just like Colonel Jackson did. Stick with us. I'm going to come right back. I want to get your take on, why it's important to serve and why you think we're facing so many problems with service and people wanting to serve or able to serve. So we're going to get your opinion on that. And folks, your phone calls are welcome. Up next in the next hour, it's Open Phone America, 833-482-5337. Any topic. I'm taking everybody's calls. I know we've been off for a few days for the holiday, so I'm happy to chat with you guys. 833-482-5337. I'm Rich Valdez. He's Captain Scott Montefusco, and we're coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Rich Valdez with Captain Scott Montefusco, retired Marine Corps captain and FBI agent. And I want to ask you about the article I was reading earlier that says 77% of the youth in our country cannot serve because of mental illness, being overweight, or using drugs or other health problems. And when you look at that, and this is, again, coming from the Pentagon, and you think of, you've spoken so highly of your service. And if you could tell everybody that's listening, we have, millions of people listening across the country. Scott, what do you tell them in terms of, why they should serve?
Well, we all need to remember where we came from as Americans. This country was founded on liberty, justice, and freedom. we have a governance which is like none other in the world. And we have to protect those freedoms and liberties. And that's what our military does. In a lot of ways, the United States is a threat to many other countries that don't have this ingenious system of governance. They suppress their people. We're a beacon of freedom to the world. And those countries are threatened by us. Look at North Korea, for example. They want to come here. They want liberty and freedom. And so we have to protect it. And we cannot take it for granted. Many immigrants come here and they outperform our own Americans who sadly have taken our system for granted. So we need to step up. We need to serve. I tell young people all the time, not only are we a beacon to the world of liberty and freedom, but we have a volunteer force. And many other countries are impressed into service. They must serve in the military. The young people have a choice, and sometimes they don't realize that, when they turn 18 and they sign up for that selective service, that selective service list will become mandatory if people don't volunteer and serve.
Right.
When they see somebody in uniform, they should realize that perhaps that person is serving in their place. Because if he didn't step up or she didn't step up or if people didn't step up and voluntarily serve, that list would become a mandatory list, a draft. And I also believe that if you want to do something bigger than yourself and you want to learn about leadership, work ethic, teamwork, and giving back, the military is a great place to start. And I say start because it doesn't have to be a career.
Right. No, but it's a stepping stone and it's a foundation.
Yes. And I've worked with many veterans, and veterans have they learn a certain sense of responsibility, a can-do, mission-oriented work ethic, teamwork, and they take that and carry that with them the rest of their lives. I certainly carried it with me into the FBI and in every walk of life, every job I've ever had. I brought that work ethic and sense of responsibility with me.
And you're displaying it now with your trek to Alaska, right? In a
not to Alaska,
1952
cross
Willys Jeep.
country.
Yeah.
San Francisco to New York City. Yeah.
If people want to learn more about what you're doing, how do they find you? How do they follow you?
So I created a website, which is called the Great American Road Trip for Veterans. And so to find it, it's GARTforvets.org. So it stands for Great American Road Trip for Veterans. It's GARTFORVETS.org. Great American Road Trip for Veterans. And when you visit my website, you can...
well, they'll have to see when they go. GARTforvets.com. GARTforvets.com is the website. Captain Scott Montefusco, I want to thank you for being with us. I appreciate your insight, the great historical lesson that you taught us. I didn't know much about that trip, and I thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Rick.
All right, folks. Open Phone America coming up next.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media, your liberty-loving Latino amigo, and I am so thrilled to be back with you. I'm glad that my voice is working again. I had bronchitis over a week ago, and the residual effect on my voice was rough. Still a little bit rough, but coming back. We're on the mend. So Our phone number, if you want to join us, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDES. I am here to keep you company straight till 1 a.m. Eastern time because I am in the New York area. If you're in another part of the country, I'd love to talk to you because I love to hear what's going on out in Oregon and California, Minnesota. Where else? We get a lot of calls from. We get a lot of calls from Missouri. So anywhere you're at, I want to hear from you because obviously that's what we do on Open Phone America. And a number of things we've talked about tonight. We've talked about the importance of finding good statesmen and making that juxtaposition with those in the biblical tradition. And that was a really fascinating conversation. We also discussed this trek across the country with Captain Scott Montefusco, where he's reenacting what Colonel Horatio Jackson did. And, you know, I never know what I'm getting when I agree to have these conversations with folks. The one thing I do know, and my goal, just to give you an idea, is to let you, the listener, right? The show is for you. It's not for me. And I always want to leave you with a show where you can learn something. Where, you know, when you're done listening to all 3 hours of this program, you can say, wow, you know, I got a little bit of news, I got a little entertainment, I got a little bit of this and that, but I learned something, maybe one or two new things that I didn't know before, whether it's history or just something in general. I feel it's important for us to learn something new. And in an entertaining and informative way, right? So that we deliver this material in the most entertaining way, so you're not bored to tears. Because you could learn in college, right? You could learn in a lot of places. You don't have to come to talk radio to this program to learn, but you do, and I appreciate it. And it's I'm grateful for an audience like this one that's as intelligent as you are, because you can grasp these concepts and you lend to the conversation with your phone calls, right? 833-482-5337 is the phone number. 833-4-VALDES if you want to chime in. And it is, in my opinion, one big kitchen table, right, where we're having this discussion and everybody's pulling up a chair. Some folks at the family dinner table don't want to say anything. They just want to listen. You know, there's a lot of people like that. And then there's others that, you know, can't wait to be heard. They want, you know, they want to tell their story. It's like any other family dinner, you know, that one uncle that wants to pontificate on everything and hog up all the airtime. No, that's not me. It's my job to kind of do this. But I mean, those that they want to, you know, have one-sided conversations. No, I think it's important that we entertain all sides. And that's why I always welcome people that disagree with me. They come to the front of the line. But the other goal that I have is to honor the traditions of this program that date back to Long John Neville and Larry King and Jim Bohannon. And for you to hear and participate in a conversation that you're not going to hear anywhere else. Even if it's with a guest that somebody else just had on, my hope is that we're going to have a different approach, a different way of having that conversation and get you to a different result so that you can see things in a different light. And that's my goal. I don't know if I achieve that goal every day. It's definitely my aspiration to do that. But I wanted to share that with you because I think it's so important that we have these conversations on a daily basis. And it was something somebody brought up to me. Honestly, I have the good fortune of sometimes meeting listeners or they'll inbox me or comment on social media, at Rich Valdez with an S, by the way. And I glean a lot of insight from people when they can share things like, you know, here's why I like the show, or here's something I learned. Or when I meet people that to me are the most unique, right? People that don't listen to any other radio or participate in any social media other than listening to this show. And I've actually met a handful of them, believe it or not. So they're not getting their news from Twitter or Facebook, and they're not on Instagram, and they also don't listen to talk radio. They only tune into this show. How they found out, why, all have different stories. But my point is, when I speak with those people, it's very unique because they haven't listened to this is not the fourth or fifth show of the day that they've heard. And when they say things like, you know, I can't wait to hear the program because the people that are on the program really bring it to life. You know, when they hear these stories and these anecdotal stories or these the analysis on the news of the day or whatever it is from our amazing guests, it leaves them with an impression that's favorable, and they're able to, conduct themselves at a level where they feel more engaged and they know a little bit more about what's going on. They feel better equipped. And that's an absolute honor to me that people are, listening to this program and taking that much from it. Because there's a lot of shows out there you could listen to and a lot of amazing hosts, much better than me. But I wanted to thank you and just make that little comment. Now, a couple of things I want to talk about in addition to what we talked about tonight and Hunter Biden and the scandals that surround him and the cocaine that was found in the White House and Joel Baboso Biden and que mala eres, the vice president, and all of that. We're going to, of course, talk about that. But I also wanted to get your take on what your reaction to Independence Day was. I know I live in a small town that has a very long-running parade, and a lot of small towns have long-running parades. I think everybody uses the same moniker as, the oldest parade in America or whatever. But I know that the village of Ridgefield Park in New Jersey does have one such parade that is probably the second oldest in the country, maybe next to the one in Staten Island, New York, that I think goes right back to like 1776 or something like that. But I bring that up because every year I check out the parade. My house is along the parade route. And it's awesome to see the people, the little kids, people, they line up with long chairs on the sidewalk, and they bring their kids. And it's a real event. It's a real can't miss type of thing in my town. And I think it's a great tradition. And, I was watching my nephew who was with his friends who I've seen grow up. I've seen these kids grow up, and now they're men. He's 21 years old this year coming. And I think it's great to see that these were little kids once that were, flocking to catch the candy being thrown off of the fire trucks to actually being there as young men watching the parade as, not a rite of passage, but just an interesting thing. The thought that I had was, how often do we see that, right? And are people into patriotism? And lamentably, no. There's some survey out. Let me see if I could find it here. But the one I saw said that people are something like 60 or 70% less patriotic than they've ever been before. And I thought, my goodness, that is horrible for America. It's horrible for one of my favorite holidays, the 4th of July. It's horrible for a lot of things, for our overall national morale. And I was curious, do you out there in the audience feel the same way? Did you see a decline in your 4th of July cookout? Did less people come to your barbecue because they hate America? I don't know if that's accurately put. I don't know if that's just me being hyperbolic, but I'm curious to know what your take is on that. So give me a call, 833-482-5337. Plus, any topic goes. I'm happy to have that conversation with you. 833-4-VALDEZ. We're coming right back to your calls and more.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Rich Valdez, who again will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to him.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
There was a story in the New York Times over the weekend about Hunter Biden's daughter in Arkansas. Does the president acknowledge this little girl as his granddaughter?
I don't have anything to share from here.
Even on a question like that one, and I probably wouldn't have anything to share either. You start asking me about my granddaughter, I'll probably get in your face. I don't even have a granddaughter. But I think this is the first time she obfuscated, and it was appropriate to do so. But she's so used to running away from the questions. It's kind of like, business as usual for, I was going to call her Jen Circle Back, Pasaki Silent P. But no, that's Karine Jean-Pierre, who I never really came up with a good nickname for. And you guys had some good ones that you chimed in on social media. Feel free to do that again. If you've got a really good nickname for Karine Jean-Pierre, please let me know. Something catchy, maybe a little bit of alliteration, something kind of funny would be great, because Karine Jean-Pierre is just not funny, I got to come up with something funny. Anyway, we're going to your calls because we have a lot to discuss, from the Biden family to all sorts of things. Let's see. Here we go. Let's go to our buddy Gil in the Philippines, patiently waiting, listening to WJTN online. Gil, happy Independence Day. Welcome, sir.
Well, this is a very auspicious day here also. It's a working holiday, July 4th, and it's called Filipino-American Friendship Day.
Wow. That's so cool. So do you shoot off fireworks and have barbecues?
No.
What do you do?
Most Filipinos.
How do you celebrate your American friends?
Filipinos don't even know. Most Filipinos don't even know there's a Filipino-American Friendship Day.
That's just for expats that are living there?
No, not that. It goes back to World War II. In 1946, the year after the war ended, the Philippines was given their sovereignty by the United States. Mm-hmm. The Philippines at that time was a territory, just like Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And Guam. The Philippines was a territory, and there had been a plebiscite, and if the locals wanted independence or wanted to remain part of the United States, they voted for independence. And a lot of them have been kicking themselves ever since. But the enabling legislation was passed through the Congress, and
and the rest is history.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Now I want to ask you something, Gil. I want to know, how do you celebrate Filipino-American Friendship Day without fireworks and hot dogs?
Let's just say
beer
a
involved?
bottle of champagne and a bottle of champagne and my Filipino wife.
All right. I'll take it. Gil in the Philippines. Thank you, my brother. Always good to hear your voice. I appreciate your teaching us about American Filipino Friendship Day, July 4th. Who knew there was such a thing? I love it. Let us continue. Where do we go now? We're going to Ron calling us from Coleman, Alabama. WURL. Whirl. Ron, welcome. You're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
I had something I believe it might be interesting. First, just a little joke here. I believe we got a little bit of kindred spirits. They had done a study on baldness, and they say if you was bald in the front, that you was a thinker, and if you was bald in the back, you was a lover. If you was bald in the front and the back, you think you're a lover.
I love that. That's terrific.
I figure me and you's kindred spirits on that deal.
Oh, for sure.
But, I figure with a little levity don't hurt every once in a while.
Absolutely.
But I was wondering if you was aware in between 1869 and 1901, right after the Civil War, there's 20 black conservatives elected here in the South, and congressmen, 2 senators, and 1 lieutenant governor, and it was all Southern states that elected them because the North did not allow for over another 100 years for the Northerns to vote, and that happened in 1965.
Wow.
I want to know that we got, there's the names, of course, and they're on the record, but there's 8 from South Carolina 4, North Carolina, Alabama 3, Virginia, Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, and Mississippi, each one elected these congressmen. And the two black senators in Mississippi.
Now, are these state senators?
Sir?
These are U.S. senators or state senators?
State senators. They Hiram K. Riles and Blank K. Bruce.
Well, and the reason I ask is because we don't have that many conservative black senators now, right? I think we've got Tim Scott, and that's right, Tim Scott. That's it. So it would be great if we had more conservative senators in the United States Senate, and if they're black, even better, right? Why not? I'll take a conservative in any color I can get him in, and Tim Scott's not always conservative on every issue, but I think for the most part he's a solid guy, except for when he's saying nice things about Mitch McConnell. That always kind of rubs me the wrong way. Anyway, Ron, thank you. I love that Alabama accent. Sounds just like an accent from Brooklyn, New York, right? Anyway, thank you, Ron. I appreciate it. Let us continue. Actually, we're not going to continue because you won't have enough time. So let me share with you this. We'll get to your calls right after this commercial. But first, I want to tell you about this. Listen to this. Gallup poll, 38%, this is a new record low, are extremely proud to be an American. Yep. That means 62% are not proud. That's horrible. 38% of U.S. adults who say they are extremely proud to be American is the lowest in the Gallup poll, which started for this particular poll in 2001. So you're talking almost a quarter century of results, and this is the lowest ever. Doesn't surprise me. 27% say they're very proud, and 65% of U.S. adults express pride in the nation. Thank God. But 22% say they are moderately proud, while 9% are only a little proud, and 4% say they're not proud at all. Now, I think sometimes when you get these results, it's because you gave so many options, right? I mean, people are married. You know, are you married? Yes or no. Make it binary. Do you like being married? Do you like being married a lot? Do you like it a little? Are you moderately happy that you're married? You're going to get all sorts of crazy answers if you ask the question that way. Anyway, stick around. We're going to get to the rest of your calls. I'm Rich Valdez. It's America at Night. We're doing Open Phone America, and your calls are coming right up. 833-482-5337.
Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. Lots of calls. Going to try to get to every last one of you, but I just want to give you this headline. I won't even give you the whole story. Listen to this. A man in Maryland stole a forklift from Lowe's, and he fatally runs down a woman at a Home Depot. Now, this poor woman was asleep in her car. He hits her car with the forklift. She gets out like, hey, what the heck? What are you doing? And he runs her over. Lamentably, she died. And that's what happened here. Absolute insanity. The suspect, his name is Bryce Caleb Timothy Brown, 20 years old, from Waldorf, Maryland, broke into the business, stole the forklift, rammed it through the rear gates, according to the sheriff's office. And, he goes and rams into this lady's car. Her name, Gloristine Pinky, 73 years old. They didn't know each other. She gets out of the car and began running away. He followed her, struck her with the forklift, and ran her over. Then stole her car and ran away. He fled with her car. Absolute insanity. What is going on in Maryland? Wow. Anyway, that's almost as crazy as the White House. Let's go to your calls. Let's see here. Let's go to Matt, Eastern North Carolina. WTKF. Matt, welcome. You're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Hello, Rich. How are you doing? I'll make it real quick.
Yes, sir.
That is a terrible story about the forklift, first of all.
Yeah, crazy.
I mean, that's insane. But as I always make everything quick, as far as this White House cocaine business, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me, Rich?
Loud and clear.
Okay. Well, here's the problem. A man in your same line of business, who shall remain unnamed, I said, what if someone else planted that cocaine to derail the Biden reelection, right?
Yep.
And he said, oh, no, Matt. You know who I'm talking about. I can't mention his name. He said, that was Hunter Biden's cocaine. What's your opinion?
Yeah, listen, I don't know if somebody put it there, didn't put it there. All I can tell you is all fingers point to a Democrat who does not like Biden. That's the only thing that I can come up with. You can't find a Republican not 100 feet near the White House. I don't see him frequenting with the Koch brothers or anybody else. So clearly this was a Democrat that, and I'm saying who leaked it. I don't know whose it belongs to, whose it is. But I do know, and I don't know for a fact, but I have a very strong inclination here that whomever did this because they want to see Biden softened or weakened in a Democrat primary. Now, his opponents, I don't know who they are. I think RFK Jr. I don't think he's been near the White House either. So I don't think he's a suspect. But it was definitely somebody who wanted to make sure that Biden got in trouble for this and got the negative press on it, and they made sure that the press found out about it, which I think normally this would be swept under the rug and nobody would be any the wiser. So you might be onto something. Who knows? I'm not going to rule it out. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate your call. We will continue with your calls. Let's see. Where do we go here? Kim, Shields, Michigan, KDKA. Hey, Kim, you're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Hi, Rich. Good to have you back.
Thank you. Good to be back.
And what I called about is I remember back when James O'Keefe with Project Veritas, when they came into possession of Ashley Biden's diary that she apparently she had been in drug rehab and she left it there and somebody there found it and this couple came and sold it to Project Veritas. But it said in there that, and I'm not blaming Ashley because she can't help who her father is, but I'm just saying that she would put in that diary that Joe Biden would come in the shower and shower with her. I just think that Biden is a nasty, perverted old creep, and I think that's why Hunter is like he is, and that's why poor Ashley is like she is. And I just think that Biden so messed up and he spread it down a couple generations, And I wanted to tell you one other quick thing. Sure. I don't know if this has anything to do with your allergies being bad, but I read a story on my phone that New York is hit with massive invasion of green aphids. Aphids are a type of plant lice. They're little things that land on leaves and swarms, and they suck the life out of you. I can tell you,
I've never seen so much green pollen as I have this year. It was inordinate.
Yeah, and my allergies have been really bad. And I too, the other night. This is the last thing. You said that you didn't get allergies till your 30s. I didn't get them till I was almost 50, and they're pretty bad. So I hear a lot of people older getting them. I don't know what it is, but thanks, Rich.
Thank you. Yeah, interesting. Maybe we're all getting them because of something in the air. These green little Martians that you're talking about that messed me all up and took away my velvety, smooth voice. Scoundrels. How dare they? Anyway, thank you, Kim. I appreciate it. Just to respond to what you were saying about Ashley Biden, from what I understand, the attorneys that put Project Veritas in possession of that diary verified that it was hers and whatnot, and that it did in fact have these stories about how she was bothered by President Biden her dad, whatever, showering with her as a child. And I don't know if that's what prompted her issues or not. I do wish her the best. And you're right. People don't get to pick their parents. And on a separate note, totally unrelated to any of that, I think so many of us, right? We don't realize what we put our kids through, even though we think we did a great job and we're doing the right thing most of the time. I think, 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the road, our kids will be looking back or speaking to some therapist somewhere or their friend at a bar or whatever. And they're, going to be like, I realize I do what I do today because my mom did this or my dad did that. And, whether hopefully it's not as sinister as what we see Hunter and Ashley Biden doing. But, I've come to realize that we all play a part in both the good and the bad of our kids' trajectory in some way, right? I mean, there's personal responsibility for sure. And as my kids get older, I realize that, and I go, that's why they do that. They do it because of me. It was my fault. I set them up. So anyway, thank you, Kim. I appreciate that. Let us continue. Let's see. Where do we go from here? We go from Michigan. We are going to go to Jacob in San Jose, California, on the other side of the country. Go right ahead. KZTA, welcome.
Yes, Rich, regarding the 4th of July parades that you were describing, that's so wonderful how they demonstrate. I would say, and I think you would agree, and most people would agree, it demonstrates patriotism, showing support for the United States of America. But the good rabbi you had on
I just want to
earlier,
say, I just want to say, you're right. One of the first things that I gleaned from the local parade in New Jersey that I was talking about earlier was how the first thing that sets off the parade here is a cannon fire, right? And you hear boom, and it's literally, to remember the revolution. And, then they end with fireworks to remember, the rocket's red glare. And it's a real trip down memory lane to remember why we have independence from the tyranny of King George. And I thought it was really apropos. Go right ahead about the rabbi.
So just to bring this back to the parade and how it's a demonstration, but the Associated Press, they've been on this, I guess, some kind of campaign about how not appropriate anymore is the word patriot or patriotism, and it kind of makes you wonder what with the rabbi here, maybe a spiritual thing with Nathan's famous, the big New York City wonderful hot dogs that are made there in the restaurants, yet they have this association July 4th with this hot dog eating contest, how many you can stuff. I think this year it was 62 that was consumed by one person. I think his name is Joey Chestnut.
That's correct. Yeah.
And how does that equate to this?
I don't think it does equate. I think it's kind of like, saying, how does funnel cake equate to a boardwalk at a beach? It's just, there's a lot of people. It's an opportunity to sell something, and they do it. It just became a tradition. I don't think it's because of patriotism. I think it's more so just there are people gathered, and they go ahead and eat them. But it is a fascinating competition, right? You've got these competitive eaters. And, the previous reigning champ, Kobayashi, little tiny guy, Japanese guy, he was really, really good until Joey Chestnut took him out. And it's amazing to see what he can do. And these guys are professional competitive eaters. Now, I'll give you a little tidbit that you may not have known. But on this program, I've had as a guest a couple of times, and he's taught me so much about talk radio at the local level, Curtis Sliwa, who's a true blue New Yorker. He participated in the hot dog eating competition, not this year, but several years ago. And he came in second place back when 16 hot dogs would get you second place. I don't think that 16 hot dogs get you anywhere close to the finalists now. But, interesting, right? This whole hot dog eating competition. Thank you, Jacob, in San Jose, California. I appreciate the call. Always love to hear from our friends in California. And we're going to take a quick pause right here, come back with the rest of your calls. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
This land is your land, and this land is my land. From the California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me.
All right, now I requested that song to be played. I wanted the Bad Bunny version. I guess we didn't get the Bad Bunny reggaeton version, but I'll take that one. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, this land was made for you and me. Well, not according to Ben and Jerry's, because Ben and Jerry, the two guys that started the ice cream company and then sold it to Unilever, and still participate in their what they call marketing, which I'm going to call Marxist propaganda. But they put out a tweet on the 4th of July looking for a little smoke, and they found it with me. The 4th of July, listen to this. This is what they put in their tweet. The 4th of July, excuse me, let me start again. This 4th of July, it's high time we recognize that the U.S. exists on stolen indigenous land and commit to returning it. Learn more and take action now at benandjerrys.co/46VRYU3, blah, 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 blah. And it has a little image attached to it that says the United States was founded on stolen indigenous land this 4th of July. Let's commit to returning it. This is stolen land. And it has little pictures of stars and stripes in the shape of fireworks. Now, this is what they put on Twitter, and of course, sparking outrage amongst lots of people. I don't even respond to these silly shenanigans. I rarely do. I respond to lots of silly shenanigans on Twitter. I just didn't do this one because I was busy having fun doing the Dougie somewhere. But ultimately, what happens here is these guys are malcontent America haters, right? They really are. They just are. They hate America. They believe that everything is on stolen land. I was doing a hit on Newsmax TV earlier today, and Emma Reckenberg, the anchor of National Report, she says, did anybody bother to ask them if they're willing to give back the milk they stole from that cow? Because that cow is oppressed and didn't consent to that. And I thought, excellent point, right? The cow makes the milk that makes their ice cream. These guys are clowns. But they say that America is built on stolen land, and they chose the 4th of July to make this announcement. So my question to you all in the moments that we have remaining is this going to be another example of going woke and going broke? It's not the first time, but this is definitely the most egregious time, right? Will people now abandon ship on Ben & Jerry's because of their anti-Americanism? I don't know, but you let me know. Let's go to the phones. Let's go to Zanesville, Ohio, listening on Rich Valdez, AmericaAtNight.com. Let's check in with our buddy Paul. Paul, you're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Hey, good evening, Rich. I don't think I could eat 62 hot dogs in a year, to be truthful, but I do love me a good Chicago hot dog. And then with Ben & Jerry's, well, go right ahead, do what you want to do, and you'll just take the same path that Bud Light did. Go right ahead. And I hope. Actually, I actually celebrated the 4th of July tonight with my wife. We had a steak dinner, ribeyes that my daughter got me for my Father's Day gift, and baked potato and salad. So we did it up pretty good. I worked all through the weekend, and I kind of changed up what I wanted to say a little bit because you have so many interesting things, while I'm listening in between before we get on the air. Yeah, and I worked at a local big box store, and there are so many people that are upset right now with Joe Biden and the economy.
Yeah. Why?
Where I work,
because they can't afford to buy anything.
Because the right inflation. There was the 4th of July, and I was like on a bumper pool table waiting on people, getting them gas grills, getting them, blow up pools, whatever, all kind of things. And people were just upset. And this guy went by and he said, well, thanks, Biden. And I'm not allowed to talk politics at work, but I went, yes, sir. And you ought to have seen the people around me going, I've had it with this guy. And I think they're changing. You know, this guy, and you also made me chuckle when you said this gives new meaning to the word White House. Because, you know, Hunter Biden, yeah, I mean.
They're lucky it wasn't Christmas, or I would have said it's a white Christmas.
Yes. Yes. And, you know, it's hard to tell. We've had so many stories, you know, already that, you know, it was in this area, it was in that area. But I think this will get swept under the rug, just like everything does with Hunter Biden and the Bidens. You know, I don't even know what to think anymore. But I do want to say one other thing. The judges, the judicial, they are stepping up. They're stepping up. They're stepping up. And I appreciate
finally
that.
Getting it right. Yeah, I think they also had their 4th of July barbecues, and people told them, you're ruining America. Get that guy out of here and stop letting him do what he wants to do with everything. Paul, thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Excellent comments. We'll continue the conversation with the rest of you as soon as we get back, and we'll do that right now.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Let's go to Pendleton, Oregon, KUMA. Check in with Michael. Go right ahead.
Hey, Rich, your friend Michael here in Oregon. I'll try to be quick. I just wanted to say, Rich, I'm very proud to be an American. I think we have the greatest country in the world. This may not make some people happy, but I care about all my American fellow Americans, Republican and Democrat. I want them to be the best they can be. Race doesn't matter to me. I have friends of all races, Black, Hispanic, Asian, white, and you have the chance to do that in America. And I think the people that don't like America, Rich, if they spend a year in a lot of foreign countries, I think they'd come back with a lot more positive attitude about America.
I think you're right. And thank you, Michael. I consider you my friend, just like so many others that listen to this program and call into the show that I get to know over the time that we speak. And I can tell you, I happen to be Hispanic, so there you go. We can be friends. And you're right. There's a beauty to being American. There was once value added to believing in Americanism, to upholding patriotism as a virtue, not as something that we should shun as people look at it now. And I think that's part of the war that we face in the culture that we have to continue to fight. Thank you, Michael. Big shout out to everybody on KUMA, and take care. Good night and God bless. Hasta la próxima. Until the next time, we're going to do it all again tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked right here on this station. More great programming. I'll be back with you tomorrow. I am Rich Valdez.